Rain lashed against the cracked pavement as Elara Vance pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her frame. The wind tugged at her dark curls, plastering them against her cheeks. She glanced once more at the handwritten address scrawled on the back of an envelope, Thorne Manor. Her heart thudded. She should have felt relief. After weeks of rejection letters, sleepless nights, and meals skipped to make sure Daisy had enough to eat, she'd finally landed an interview. But this wasn't just any job. It was for the most notorious man in the city, Alistair Thorne. The name was whispered with awe and disdain in equal measure. A billionaire tech visionary, a recluse since a devastating car accident left him paralyzed 2 years ago. He hadn't been seen in public since. And rumor had it he'd driven away every caregiver before her. Elara reached the tall wrought iron gates. They loomed like prison bars, wet with rain. She pressed the intercom. A moment later, a voice crackled through. Cold. Detached. Name. Elara Vance. I'm here for the caregiver position. There was silence. A long, deliberate silence that made her shiver. Then, with a buzz, the gates creaked open. The driveway stretched endlessly, lined with skeletal trees swaying in the storm. By the time she reached the massive double doors, her shoes were soaked, her nerves frayed. A stern woman in her 50s opened the door. Her sharp eyes studied Elara as if weighing her worth in an instant. You're late. The storm. No excuses. Follow me. The house swallowed Elara whole. Marble floors gleamed under the dim light, chandeliers hung like frozen stars, and portraits of solemn ancestors watched her every move. Yet, despite its grandeur, the air felt heavy, suffocating. The woman led her into a cavernous study. Books lined the walls, their spines untouched. At the far end, in a wheelchair that seemed almost a throne, sat Alistair Thorne. Elara's breath caught. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s, perhaps, but time had carved lines of bitterness into his face. His dark hair fell carelessly across his forehead, framing eyes so sharp and unreadable that she felt pinned in place. "Miss Vance," he said, without looking up from the tablet in his lap. His voice was low, commanding, but edged with exhaustion. "Sit." She sat, her knees trembling. He scrolled through her application with quick flicks of his fingers. Art scholarship. Expelled. Financial hardship. Younger sister dependent. His eyes finally lifted, piercing into hers. "Why do you want this job?" Her throat dried. "Because I need it. And because I believe people are more than what they've been reduced to." For the first time, his expression flickered. Almost amusement. Almost pain. "You do realize," he said slowly, "that every applicant before you has quit within a week?" "I'm not them." His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "We'll see." Then, with chilling finality, he set the tablet aside. "You're hired. Don't disappoint me." The storm outside roared louder, as if sealing her fate. Elara's suitcase looked pitifully small against the vastness of her new quarters. The bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment back in the city, with tall windows draped in velvet curtains. But it felt more like a museum than a home. Too pristine. Too empty. She ran her fingers over the polished oak dresser, imagining what it must be like to live here day after day, surrounded by wealth but starved of warmth. That evening, she was summoned to the dining hall. The table could have seated 20, yet only 2 places were set. Alistair sat at one end, his chair angled slightly away from the food. He didn't look up as she approached. "You'll eat here," he said curtly. "Meals are at 7 sharp." Elara hesitated. "Do you want me to serve you?" His gaze snapped to hers, sharp as a blade. "I'm paralyzed, Miss Vance, not helpless." "Sit." She swallowed and obeyed. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the clink of silverware. Elara tried not to stare, but she noticed how stiffly he moved his arms, how deliberate each gesture was. He was determined not to ask for help, even when his hand shook trying to cut into the roast. Finally, she spoke. "This house is beautiful, but it feels so quiet. Silence is preferable." "Sometimes," she said gently. "But not always." He didn't answer. She glanced at the vast, untouched paintings on the walls. "You used to paint?" His jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern." The rest of the meal passed in suffocating quiet. Later, alone in her room, Elara pressed a hand to her chest. She had taken this job for Daisy, for survival. But already she felt the weight of Alistair's loneliness pressing against her own. Somewhere behind those cold walls was a man drowning. And she wondered, just faintly, if she could reach him. It was near midnight when the storm knocked the power out. The manor fell into darkness, the silence broken only by the groan of the wind. Elara grabbed a flashlight from her nightstand and hurried down the hall. She found him in the study, the glow of the fire casting shadows across his face. He was struggling with something, a blanket tangled at his feet, the wheelchair stuck against the rug. "Don't," he barked as she approached. "I don't need." "Alistair." Her voice was calm, steady. "Let me." She crouched, gently untangling the wheels, lifting the blanket back into place. His hands trembled, clenched into fists. "I said I don't." "I know," she whispered. "But everyone needs help sometimes." He froze. For the first time, his eyes softened, vulnerability flickering beneath the anger. He looked away quickly, but not before she caught it. The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. Finally, he muttered, "Thank you." Just 2 words. But for Elara, it was the first crack in his fortress. Days passed, each one a delicate dance between his walls and her persistence. He remained curt, distant, but not unreachable. One afternoon, while exploring the manor, Elara stumbled upon a locked door at the end of a forgotten corridor. It was ajar, just slightly. Curiosity tugged at her. Inside was dust and silence, and art. An entire studio, abandoned yet alive with memories. Canvases leaned against the walls, some half-finished, others slashed with violent strokes. Sketches covered the tables, faces blurred, landscapes unfinished. Elara's breath caught. This was his sanctuary once. She picked up a sketchbook. The drawings grew darker with each page, descending from vibrant portraits to stormy abstracts, until the final pages were almost unreadable chaos. "What are you doing here?" She spun, startled. Alistair sat in the doorway, his face unreadable. I didn't mean to intrude. I just... Get out." His voice was sharp, but his eyes betrayed him. They weren't angry. They were haunted. "Elara," he said quietly, "some doors are meant to stay closed." She placed the sketchbook back carefully and nodded. But as she slipped past him, she couldn't ignore the whispers of the past that clung to the room. Whatever happened to him, it was more than just an accident. Elara awoke one morning to the sound of giggles echoing down the hall. She bolted upright, recognizing the voice instantly. "Daisy!" Sure enough, her little sister stood in the grand foyer, backpack still on her shoulders, eyes wide with wonder. "Surprise!" Daisy grinned. "I missed you." Elara knelt, pulling her into a tight hug. "Daisy, you can't just... How did you even get here?" "Bus. And the nice gardener let me in." Before Elara could scold her further, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What is this?" Alistair appeared at the top of the stairs, his wheelchair gliding down silently on the mechanized lift. His expression was thunderous. Elara scrambled to her feet. "I'm so sorry. This is my sister, Daisy. She shouldn't be here. I'll take her home immediately." But Daisy, fearless as always, marched right up to him. "Hi. You must be Mr. Thorne. This house is huge. Do you get lonely in here?" Elara's heart stopped. To her shock, Alistair didn't snap. Instead, he blinked. Then, unbelievably, he laughed. A real, genuine laugh that echoed through the empty hall. Daisy beamed. "You have a nice smile. You should do it more." Elara stared, stunned. She had never seen that look on his face, light, unguarded. For the first time, Alistair Thorne looked less like a fortress of steel and more like a man rediscovering pieces of himself. And in that moment, Elara realized Daisy had done in minutes what she had been trying to do for weeks. She had broken through. The sun hung low, spilling molten gold through the tall windows of Thorne Manor. Elara was in the library, helping Alistair organize a set of books that hadn't been touched in years. He didn't ask her to, but she noticed he lingered longer than usual, watching her hands skim the spines. The chime of the front doors broke the moment. Footsteps echoed, deliberate, confident. A tall man entered, his smile polished but his eyes calculating. "Marcus," Alastair said, his tone cool, wary. "Cousin." Marcus Thorne spread his arms as though greeting royalty. "I thought I'd drop by. You've been hiding away so long, I worried you'd forgotten you had family." His gaze flickered to Elara. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And who is this?" "Elara Vance," Alastair replied curtly. "My caregiver." "Caregiver," Marcus repeated, circling her slowly, like a cat toying with prey. "I must say, Alastair, you have better taste than I thought." Elara stiffened. The words were harmless on the surface, but something about his tone, possessive, mocking, sent a chill down her spine. Alastair's jaw tightened. "She is not your concern." Marcus chuckled. "Everything concerning you is my concern. Don't forget, cousin, I'm still on the board of Thorne Innovations." The air thickened with tension. Elara excused herself, but as she left, she caught Marcus watching her with a smile that felt more like a warning. She didn't know why, but she knew one thing for certain: Marcus Thorne was dangerous. A week later, Elara lingered in the abandoned studio again. She traced her fingers over an unfinished canvas, imagining the strokes of the man who painted it. She needed, to show him he was more than his bitterness. When she found him in the study, she carried a paintbrush in her hand. "You left this behind," she said softly, placing it on the desk. His eyes flickered to it, then back to her. "I told you, that part of me is dead. Only if you let it stay that way." Silence stretched between them. Finally, his hand, hesitant, almost trembling, reached out and took the brush. That night, she wheeled him into the studio. For a long time, he just stared at the canvas. Elara held her breath, afraid to break the fragile thread of the moment. Then, slowly, he dipped the brush into paint. His strokes were clumsy at first, but soon his movements grew surer, his eyes more alive. Elara watched in awe. It wasn't just art, it was resurrection. When he finally set the brush down, he turned to her, breathless. "I had forgotten," he whispered, "how it feels to create." She smiled. "Now you've remembered." For the first time since she met him, Alastair looked less like a man trapped in his body and more like an artist reclaiming his soul. The next morning, while dusting shelves in Marcus's guest room, Elara stumbled across a folder. Inside was an old newspaper clipping: "Tech billionaire Alastair Thorne crippled in tragic car accident." She scanned the article. Something was off. The official report said the brakes failed due to a manufacturing defect. But Elara remembered Alastair once mentioning he designed his own car model, a prototype never sold publicly. How could a mass defect apply to something only he used? Later, when Marcus appeared, she couldn't resist asking, "Do you think Alastair ever wonders about the accident?" she asked casually. Marcus's smile was instant, but his eyes hardened. "Accidents happen. Best not to poke around in old wounds, Miss Vance." The way he said it wasn't advice. It was a warning. That night, Elara sat awake, staring at the clipping. Something inside her whispered, it wasn't an accident. The following week, Alastair was invited, dragged, to a corporate gala. Marcus insisted his presence was necessary to reassure investors. Reluctantly, he agreed, and Elara accompanied him as support. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished marble, but Elara felt like a fish out of water. In her modest dress, she stuck out among the glittering gowns and diamond cuffs. Marcus, of course, noticed. He raised his glass, his voice just loud enough for the surrounding crowd. "Tell me, Elara, how does it feel? Caring for a billionaire must pay better than painting cheap canvases." A ripple of laughter spread among the guests. Elara flushed, her throat tightening. Before she could respond, Alastair's voice cut through, firm and sharp. "Enough." The room fell silent. Alastair's glare locked onto Marcus. "Elara is more than you could ever comprehend. You will not insult her again." Gasps echoed. Investors exchanged glances. Marcus's smile faltered, then returned, forced, brittle. "Of course, cousin," he said smoothly, raising his glass again. But his eyes burned with fury. Elara's heart pounded. Alistair had defended her. Publicly. Fiercely. And in that moment, something shifted between them, something neither could deny. It was late when they returned to the manor. Elara helped Alistair onto the terrace, where the night sky stretched endlessly above them. For a long while, they sat in silence, the cool air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. Finally, Alistair spoke. When the accident happened, he began, voice low, I thought it was the end. Not just of walking. Of everything. I built walls so high I thought no one would ever climb them. His gaze turned to her, intense, vulnerable. And then you came. Elara's breath caught. You see me, he whispered. Not the chair. Not the fortune. Me. Do you know how rare that is? Tears pricked her eyes. Alistair. I don't deserve this, he said, voice breaking. But I can't stop feeling it. He reached for her hand, his grip trembling but firm. I'm falling for you, Elara. The world seemed to pause. The stars above, the night air, the quiet thrum of her heart, all of it froze in that fragile, perfect moment. Elara squeezed his hand, her own tears spilling. Then fall. Because I'm already there. And beneath the canopy of stars, the walls around Alistair Thorne's heart began to crumble. The manor slept under a blanket of silence, but Elara couldn't. Her mind replayed Marcus's smirk, the clipped warnings, the inconsistencies in that article. She knew she was brushing the edge of something dangerous, but curiosity had never burned this fiercely before. That night, when the household lights dimmed, she slipped into the east wing. Marcus often kept his study locked, but luck, or fate, was on her side. The door was ajar. The room was a shrine to vanity. Mahogany desk polished to perfection, crystal decanters of expensive scotch, walls lined with legal tomes he probably never read. On the desk sat a laptop, still glowing. Heart hammering, Elara slid into the chair. She hesitated, fingers hovering. This is wrong. You could lose everything. But then she thought of Alistair, of his laughter returning, of the vulnerability in his eyes when he confessed under the stars. He deserved the truth. The laptop was encrypted, but Marcus wasn't as clever as he thought. After a few tries, she cracked the password, his own birth date. Inside were files labeled with cold precision, Thorne under accident, shares, investment, succession unearned. Her blood ran cold. Opening one, she found engineering schematics of Alistair's car, red-lined modifications in Marcus's hand. Another contained financial projections. How Marcus stood to gain full control of Thorne Innovations if Alistair were permanently incapacitated. Oh God, she whispered. She copied everything onto a flash drive, her hands trembling. A noise behind her. She spun around, but the hall was empty. Still, her skin prickled with the certainty she wasn't alone. She shoved the drive into her pocket and slipped out, heart pounding like a war drum. For the first time, she realized, Marcus wasn't just manipulative. He was deadly. The next morning, Elara found Alistair in the studio, brush in hand. She almost broke at the sight. He looked alive there, so much more himself. But she couldn't wait. She closed the door behind her. I found something, she said. Her voice shook. Alistair frowned. What is it? She pulled out the flash drive. Marcus wasn't just involved in your accident. He engineered it. His entire body went still. Don't say things you can't take back, Elara. I'm not guessing. I saw the files, designs of your car, plans, even projections for taking over the company. He wanted you gone. His hands tightened around the brush until paint dripped onto the floor. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he whispered, I always suspected. Her heart twisted. Why didn't you ever? Because admitting it meant acknowledging I wasn't just unlucky. That my own blood tried to destroy me. His voice cracked with restrained fury. Do you know what it's like to live with that? Elara reached for him. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Their eyes met, raw and unguarded. Slowly, Alistair took the flash drive from her hand. You've put yourself in danger, he murmured. Marcus won't let this go if he realizes. Then we face it together. For the first time, Alistair let her words anchor him. A dangerous alliance had formed, one born not of convenience, but of necessity. They couldn't simply hand the files to the authorities. Marcus's influence ran deep: lawyers, board members, politicians. Evidence could vanish before it ever saw daylight. They needed something undeniable. Alistair summoned blueprints onto his tablet, schematics of Marcus's office downtown. He keeps backups. A secure server. If we get that data, we'll have irrefutable proof. We? Elara asked, incredulous. His mouth twitched. You're the only one I trust to move freely. I'll guide you from here. Her stomach knotted. She was no spy, no thief. She was an artist who once dreamed of galleries, not heists. But then she remembered Daisy's laughter filling the manor, the way Alistair had begun to smile again. If Marcus succeeded, he would crush both those fragile lights. "All right," she whispered. "Tell me what I have to do." That evening, under flickering lamplight, they devised the plan. Elara would infiltrate Marcus's office during one of his late dinners. Alistair, ever the strategist, mapped out entry points, security cameras, and digital protocols. Her pulse quickened at the enormity of it. When she faltered, Alistair's voice steadied her. "You're stronger than you think, Elara. You've already broken through walls I thought indestructible. This is just another wall." She met his gaze, and despite the fear clawing at her, she believed him. In the days leading up to the heist, Alistair opened doors he had long kept locked, not just in the manor, but in his heart. One evening, as rain pattered against the glass, he told her about his childhood with Marcus. He was always charming, always favored by the board because he knew how to make people like him. I was the prodigy, the one who built things. He was the politician. His eyes darkened. But underneath the smile, there was always envy. When my designs took center stage, when investors praised me, I saw it in his eyes. That hunger to take what was mine. Elara listened, her heart aching. "And your accident gave him the chance." "Yes." He glanced at her, the weight of memory etched in his face. "He didn't just take my legs. He tried to take my life." Silence stretched. The manor, once oppressive, now felt alive with secrets unearthed, truths clawing to the surface. Elara placed her hand over his. "He underestimated you, Alistair. And he underestimated us." For the first time, he didn't flinch from the word us. The night arrived. Elara stood outside Marcus's office tower, her palms slick with sweat. The city glittered behind her, indifferent to the storm in her chest. Alistair's voice came through the earpiece. "Come. Steady. The guard rotation changes every 15 minutes. You have a 2-minute window. Go." She slipped inside, her footsteps echoing against marble floors. The security desk was empty, just as Alistair predicted. Her heart hammered as she followed his whispered instructions. Down the hall, past the conference room, into Marcus's private office. The door was locked. She pulled out the small device Alistair had given her, a bypass tool he'd designed years ago. With trembling hands, she pressed it to the keypad. After a tense moment, the lock clicked open. Inside, the office reeked of power, sleek glass desk, panoramic view of the city, and a server cabinet glowing in the corner. "Plug in the drive," Alistair instructed. She moved quickly, inserting the device. Files streamed onto the flash drive, line after line of damning evidence. Blueprints, financial fraud, accident schematics. Then, footsteps. Elara's breath caught. "Hide," Alistair hissed. She ducked behind the desk as the door creaked open. Marcus entered, humming softly, his silhouette tall against the city lights. He poured himself a drink, scrolling through his phone. The flash drive still blinked, downloading. Elara pressed a hand over her mouth, praying he wouldn't notice the faint hum of the server. Minutes stretched like hours. At last, Marcus set his glass down and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The drive flashed green, complete. Elara yanked it free, adrenaline surging. She slipped out the back exit, lungs burning, heart racing. "Did you get it?" Alistair's voice crackled in her ear. "Yes," she whispered, tears of relief pricking her eyes. "I got it." She had no idea her daring act had just lit the fuse to a war Marcus would never forgive. The ballroom pulsed with a murmur of reporters and flashing cameras. The press conference had been called under the guise of a corporate update, but Alistair had something far more explosive planned. From her place beside him, Elara felt the tremor in his hand as he adjusted the microphone. Not fear, she realized, but determination. Alistair's voice cut through the din, steady and commanding. For 2 years, I have lived with silence. Tonight, that silence ends. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he wheeled forward. My accident was no accident. It was an act of betrayal. My own cousin, Marcus Thorne, sabotaged the prototype vehicle that left me paralyzed. He did this to seize power within Thorne Innovations. The words landed like thunderclaps. Screens lit up behind him, displaying the damning files Elara had stolen. Blueprints, financial projections, Marcus's forged documents. The evidence was irrefutable. Marcus, standing near the front, surged to his feet. Lies, he roared. This is slander. Alistair's gaze burned into him. These are your own files, Marcus. Your own hand signed these plans. Tell me, how many lives did you think you could destroy to climb higher? Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed wildly. Marcus paled, his charm slipping like a mask torn away. Beside Alistair, Elara's chest swelled with pride. This was no longer a man imprisoned by walls. This was a warrior reclaiming his name. And the world was watching. The press conference erupted into chaos. Security swarmed as Marcus tried to push through the crowd, shouting, "You'll regret this, Alistair. You and your little nurse." Elara stiffened, but Alistair's hand squeezed hers, grounding her. Cameras followed Marcus as he attempted a last-ditch move, pulling out a forged document, waving it in the air. He's staging this. He wants sympathy. This woman, this gold digger, is manipulating him. But the crowd no longer believed him. The files on the screens told a story too precise, too damning. Reporters pressed him with questions he couldn't answer. His voice cracked under the weight of their disbelief. "Marcus Thorne," one journalist shouted, "what do you say about the memo where you calculated profit margins after Alistair's incapacitation?" Marcus froze, sweat slicking his brow. Alistair leaned forward, his voice a blade of steel. "It's over, Marcus." Security closed in. Marcus fought, his mask of charm collapsing into rage, but it was useless. The police waiting outside swept him away in handcuffs, his protests drowned by flashing cameras and murmured condemnations. Elara exhaled, her knees weak with relief. It was done. The villain was unmasked. The days that followed felt lighter, as if the manor itself had exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. Marcus was formally charged with attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. His empire of manipulation crumbled overnight. The board rallied behind Alistair, and investors flooded the company with renewed faith. But it wasn't business that consumed him now, it was healing. With Elara by his side, Alistair began intensive therapy. At first, every movement was agony, but he fought through it. His arms strengthened, his body remembered pieces of itself. One evening, Elara walked into the gym to find him standing, wobbling, supported by parallel bars, sweat dripping down his face, but standing. She clapped her hands over her mouth, tears streaming. He looked up, breathless, a faint smile tugging his lips. "I told you, no wall is unbreakable." The manor transformed, too. Rooms once locked were thrown open. Sunlight poured through windows long shrouded. Daisy visited often, her laughter echoing through the halls like a promise of joy. For the first time, Elara saw Alistair not as a man bound by shadows, but as one stepping into the light of a new beginning. Winter melted into spring. One quiet afternoon, Alistair summoned Elara to the studio. The smell of paint hung in the air, vibrant colors scattered across canvases. In the center stood an easel covered with a cloth. "Close your eyes," he said, voice trembling with uncharacteristic nervousness. She obeyed. He pulled the cloth away. "Open them." Elara gasped. The canvas was breathtaking, a portrait of her and Daisy, captured with impossible tenderness. Daisy's smile glowed like sunlight, while Elara's own likeness radiated strength and grace she hadn't realized she carried. But at the bottom corner, hidden in elegant brushstrokes, was a message painted into the folds of her painted dress. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision. She turned to him, words choking in her throat. Alistair's eyes shone, vulnerable and fierce all at once. Elara Vance, you broke through walls I thought impenetrable. You gave me life when I thought mine was over. Will you give me forever? Elara flung her arms around him, laughter and sobs mingling. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. The brush fell from his hand as he pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that sealed not just love, but triumph. The man who once hid behind shadows had painted his future, and it was her. The wedding was held in the heart of Thorne Manor, now alive with music, flowers, and warmth. The once cold hall glowed with light, every corner adorned with Elara's chosen touches, vines of jasmine, Daisy's hand-picked daisies, and Alistair's paintings turned into decorations of love. Guests gathered, not in awe of wealth, but in awe of a love story that had survived storms, betrayal, and impossible odds. Elara walked down the aisle with Daisy at her side, carrying a bouquet almost too big for her small hands. When Alistair saw them, his eyes filled with tears. He stood, supported but unshaken, determined to greet his bride on his own 2 feet. Gasps filled the room as he took step after step toward her. When they met in the middle, she whispered, "You didn't have to." "I did," he said, his voice raw with pride. "For you." The vows were simple, but no words had ever held so much power. "I promise," Alistair said, "to let you into every corner of my life, no matter how dark. You are my light." "And I promise," Elara whispered, tears streaming, "to stand with you, in shadows and in sun, until our last breath." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Daisy squealed, tossing flowers into the air. The manor erupted in applause, laughter, and joy. Later that night, Alistair wheeled Elara into the studio. A blank canvas waited on the easel. He placed a brush in her hand, then in his own. "Together?" he asked. "Always," she smiled. Their first strokes merged, bright and bold, as they began to paint their canvas of forever. The woman who broke the billionaire's walls had built something stronger in their place. A home, a love, a future without limits. And for the first time, the walls of Thorne Manor echoed not with silence, but with life. The end.